You are standing on the prow of a warship amidst the dense smoke of the Battle of Actium, where blazing torches fall into the deep blue sea. The scent of burning cedar and the saltiness of the sea air fill your nostrils as you closely observe the face of that slender young man. Gaius Octavian, who would later become Augustus, is watching Mark Antony flee toward the horizon with Cleopatra. This is the moment when a century of chaos in the Roman Republic officially collapses to make way for an eternal and ambitious empire. The drama lies not only in the sinking ships, but in the cold gaze of a man who has just completely obliterated the past. Some scholars still argue that records show this was not a liberation, but rather a sophisticated coup. You feel the chill of absolute power enveloping Octavian, who has skillfully transformed bloody ruins into order. Despite his often frail and pale physique, he remains standing amidst the roars, hiding his fatigue behind a brilliant cloak. History is shifting right beneath your feet, and you know you are but a silent traveler witnessing the birth of a deity. You see a fragile human being who has just taken the weight of the world's destiny upon his thin shoulders in this night. Hello, everyone. Tonight we will explore the life of Augustus Caesar, his life one of humanity's greatest dramas. Now, imagine you are lying comfortably in bed, feeling the soft blanket embracing your body. The space around you is quiet, with only the gentle wind blowing through the window and the dim glow of the nightlight soothing your tired eyes. You are letting go of all the day's worries as you prepare to embark on a journey through time. If we had been born in his time, perhaps we would not have been able to achieve what he did. While he had a profound impact on history, we might still be losing sleep over small, personal, and family matters. So, before you drift off to sleep, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Your support is the motivation that helps me continue this empathetic storytelling journey. I invite you to leave a comment about your current time and location. For example, Los Angeles at 10 p.m. or Tokyo at midnight. These connections help us feel closer in the peaceful and quiet atmosphere of the late night. Now, turn off the lights. Perhaps turn on a box fan or a Marpac dome for some gentle white noise in the background. And let's begin our journey tonight. Take a deep breath, let your body relax completely, and let your mind drift back into the past. You find yourself standing in the middle of a sun-drenched garden in the countryside of Velitrae, far from the noise of Rome. The intoxicating scent of rosemary and damp earth, after a light rain, spreads through the peaceful and quiet atmosphere. Before you is a small boy with pale skin and messy light blonde hair, trying to chase a butterfly. This is Gaius Octavius, the man who would later become the greatest emperor the world has ever known. You feel the child's fragility as a sudden dry cough shakes that thin chest. He is often bedridden by prolonged fevers, leaving his body in a constant state of fatigue and exhaustion. Octavius does not have the muscular build of a Roman warrior, but rather carries the melancholic air of a frail child. You want to reach out and catch him as he trips on the grass, but your hand only passes through thin air. A piece of official historical information is that Octavius was born in 63 BC, the very year Cicero suppressed the Catiline conspiracy. His birth was tied to the most violent political upheavals of the fracturing republic. A surprising detail from the record shows that, although born in Rome, Octavius spent most of his childhood in his father's hometown. Velitrae was where he learned to observe the world with eyes much older than his actual years. Some scholars still argue that records show Octavius's family, though wealthy, were still considered new men. The aristocracy in Rome always looked upon them with disdain because of their common origins from the equestrian class. You stand quietly in the dimly lit room when his father, Gaius Octavius, suddenly passes away when he is only 4 years old. The room is thick with the scent of candle wax and the sobbing of his mother Atia echoing between the stone walls. The pain of losing his father left a deep crack in the boy's heart, creating a loneliness that nothing could compensate for. You see Octavius sitting huddled in a dark corner, his small hands clutching the hem of his father's cloak. The absence of a father figure forced him to mature early, learning to protect himself in a treacherous society. You empathize with the yearning to prove his own worth that was flickering within a mind already full of anxiety. That boy did not know that the Julian blood flowing in his mother's veins would soon change the destiny of the entire world. You see determination beginning to show clearly in eyes that were naturally full of weakness and fatigue. Nights spent awake due to illness trained Octavius in the ability to contemplate and plan meticulously from a very young age. He could not fight with muscle, so he chose to fight with intellect and boundless patience. Let your mind relax completely, just as Octavius himself is leaning against an old tree, looking toward the distant horizon. You know that this frail boy's journey has only just begun, and the harshest challenges lie ahead. As the peaceful childhood days in Velitrae recede, the path of education takes you across the sea to Apollonia, where a bright but high-pressure future begins to take shape under the shadow of his great uncle. You are standing on a windswept marble balcony in the city of Apollonia, overlooking the deep blue Adriatic Sea. The sea breeze carries the saltiness and the sound of waves rustling against the cliffs, gently moving your locks of hair. Sitting right beside you is the teenage Octavius, now 18 years old, engrossed in ancient parchment scrolls. His face looks delicate, yet still bears the clear marks of fatigue after hours of intense and lonely study. A piece of official historical information is that Caesar sent his nephew here to undergo military and rhetorical training. This was an important preparatory step for the great expedition to conquer the powerful Parthian kingdom that lay ahead. A strange detail from the records shows that, before this, Octavius had journeyed through dangerous lands to reach Spain. Despite having just recovered from a severe illness, he resolutely crossed enemy lines to meet Caesar, regardless of the risks. You feel the admiration mingled with the pressure weighing heavily on the young man's heart. He yearns to be as great as his uncle, but his frail body is always an invisible barrier, difficult to overcome. Some scholars still argue that records show Caesar recognized Octavius's extraordinary potential early on. They suggest that the adoption was not just a matter of will, but a calculated spiritual succession. The pungent scent of India ink blends with the aroma of burning cedar wood from the small fireplace, spreading throughout this quiet room. You see Octavius gently rub his cold hands, his eyes looking distantly toward Rome, where the storm awaits. He has no idea that he is living out the final peaceful days of his life as an unknown commoner. The loneliness of his intellect makes him somber, completely detached from his peers who are playing nearby. Every page he turns is a brick building, the sharp and cold political mindset for his future. He is learning to hide his true emotions behind a calm face, a skill that will help him survive among the wolves. You stand there, feeling his steady breathing in the middle of the silent night, wanting to speak a word of warning, yet your lips remain still. Destiny has already been written in the lines of the secret will lying deep within the Temple of Vesta. Octavius's world is about to shatter into 1,000 pieces as the grim news from Rome crosses the sea to find him in Apollonia at dawn. You see him clenching his family ring. The last of his peace and innocence is slowly fading away. The shadow of the giant Caesar begins to envelop him, transforming a teenager into the heir of an empire. You stand quietly, watching him prepare to enter the storm, your heart full of empathy for the burden he carries. The philosophical parchment scrolls suddenly become heavy as the tragic news from Rome arrives, forcing the young man to close the chapter on his childhood to face the bloody reality following the death of Caesar. You are standing beside Octavius on a high cliff in Apollonia, the morning chill seeping through your thin cloak. The sound of the waves rustling below suddenly turns heavy as a messenger ship from Rome docks in great haste. A trembling parchment scroll is handed over, and you see the 18-year-old's complexion turn from rosy to deathly pale. The tragic news has arrived. Julius Caesar, his great-uncle and his only pillar of support, has been assassinated. A piece of official historical information is that Caesar was stabbed a total of 23 times in the middle of the Senate. However, a strange detail from the records reveals that among them, only the third stab was truly fatal. You feel Octavius's racing heartbeat as he realizes that he has now become the next target. The peaceful world of books and philosophy has just completely collapsed beneath the feet of this thin and frail teenager. Records show that Octavius stood before a life-or-death decision: flee to save his life or march toward Rome. Close friends like Agrippa advised him to use the army in Apollonia to protect himself immediately. You stand there, looking deep into eyes filled with fear, but also the gradual ignition of a cold fire of ambition. He knows that if he steps back now, he will forever remain an unknown figure, forgotten by history in the shadows. The scent of dry ink on Caesar's will seems to emanate an invisible power, binding his destiny to the empire. The young man has just discovered that he is not only the heir to a fortune, but also the heir to a name. A deep empathy rises within you as you witness the moment Octavius decides to cast aside safety. He chooses to return to Rome almost entirely alone, a reckless move whose consequences no one could foresee. You see his hands gripping the ship's gunwale as the vessel begins to depart for the Italian peninsula. A sense of profound loneliness envelops the space, as a boy has just had to personally bury his own childhood. The fracture within Octavius's inner self begins to form as he learns to transform pain into a sharp political weapon. He is no longer the sickly child of Velitrae, but is gradually transforming into an old fox among the wolves of Rome. Let your breathing relax with the rhythm of the oars on the vast sea, as the ship laden with destiny glides along. You know that every passing mile of sea is a step closer to the center of bloody conspiracies. The ship, filled with determination, glides over the turbulent waves, taking you straight into the eye of the political storm, where a bloody alliance is about to be forged amidst the whistling winds of the muddy Bononia River. You are standing on a small muddy island in the middle of a river near Bononia, where the November chill seeps through your thin cloak. The metallic smell of wet armor mingling with the pungent scent of mud creates a heavy atmosphere. Before you, Octavian sits across from Mark Antony and Lepidus around a crude wooden table. The silence between these three men is more terrifying than the wind whistling through the barren trees surrounding this island. You observe Octavian's hands. They are pale from the cold, but do not tremble as he holds the stylus. At 19, he is negotiating the division of the world as if a god, rearranging the chess pieces of destiny. In 43 BC, the Second Triumvirate was officially established with absolute power. Unlike Caesar's secret alliance, this was a legal institution that granted them the power of life and death over all of Rome. The air inside the tent is thick, with the sour smell of vinegar used for cleaning and the scent of old leather. Octavian narrows his eyes slightly at the long list placed on the table, his face as cold as an expressionless marble statue. A strange detail from the record shows that the first names placed on the execution list were Lepidus's own brother and Antony's uncle. True power has no room for deep affection or sacred blood ties. You see a momentary flicker of hesitation in Octavian's eyes when Cicero's name is brought up for discussion. Cicero, the mentor who supported him in politics, is now merely a commodity to be traded in a bloody political game. Records show that Antony fiercely demanded Cicero's head in exchange for his submission. Octavian, despite owing a deep debt of gratitude, ultimately gave a slight nod, a ruthless betrayal, in exchange for survival. You want to touch his shoulder to stop that fateful stroke of the pen, but your hand is only an ethereal mist. This is the agony of power, where one must personally kill what remains of their humanity. Outside, thousands of soldiers wait in the mud, their spears glinting like silver teeth under the sunset. The proscription list decides the fate of hundreds of senators and thousands of wealthy Roman equestrians. You feel the weight of the ink as it soaks into the parchment. Every stroke is a life snatched away, a family torn apart, all just to fund the upcoming war of vengeance in the East. Octavian stands up. His gestures now carry a strange stiffness and distance. He has just traded his soul for a place in history, and the boy from Velitrae seems to have vanished completely. You quietly follow him back to the camp amidst the crunching of footsteps on gravel. The world has just lost its moral heartbeat, leaving only the cold calculation of an empire gradually taking shape in blood and tears. As the proscription lists have just dried, the trumpets of war sound once more, urging us toward the Fields of Philippi, where blood debts must be paid in battles of life and death. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of the arid fields of Philippi in Macedonia, where the sun's heat still seethes up from the dust. The scent of scorched grass mingling with the sweat of tens of thousands of warriors makes the air thick and utterly suffocating. In the windswept command tent, Octavian lies on a litter, his face pale from the sudden illness tormenting his thin body. Even though his physique is so frail that he cannot stand on his own, his eyes still burn with a fire of hatred directed toward the assassins. You feel the trembling of his fingers as they touch the hilt of his sword, a painful contrast between grand ambition and physical capability. We see a young man who must fight himself before entering the bloody battle against the Republic's killers. A piece of official historical information is that the Battle of Philippi took place in 42 BC, where the Triumvirate forces confronted Brutus and Cassius. This was not only a battle for control of Rome, but a bloody purge to avenge the death of the great Caesar. The brass trumpets sound piercingly, tearing through the silence of dawn, marking the beginning of the largest battle in ancient history. You see the authoritative Antony on horseback, while Octavian struggles not to faint amidst the terrifyingly chaotic sounds of this battlefield. A strange detail from the records shows that Octavian had to hide in a marsh for 3 days to avoid being hunted down when his side was losing. The image of the future emperor covered in mud, trembling in the darkness, is a secret he wanted to hide his entire life. Records show that Octavian's absence was actually due to a dream of an ill omen by his personal physician at the time. It was this trust in sharp intuition that saved his life the moment his camp was overrun and ruthlessly destroyed by Brutus's troops. The clashing of metal and roaring sound like thunder in your ears, but you focus only on the silence of the cold Octavian. He is learning to accept the humiliation of the underdog while waiting for a much stronger and more brutal opportunity for revenge later on. The psychological relief of hearing that Brutus and Cassius had committed suicide after their defeat seemed to soothe the physical pains racking his body. You see a cold smile faintly appear on Octavian's lips, marking the end of those who dared to betray the sacred bloodline. The smell of fresh blood begins to fade with the evening breeze, giving way to the scent of smoke from the campfires blazing across the field of death. You witness the rise of a will of steel, tempered through illness and the most horrific fears of youth. As the smell of blood on the battlefield has just faded, a new rift silently begins to grow, turning old allies into enemies as power is split between Rome and the temptations of the East. You are standing in a narrow room on the Palatine Hill, where winter north winds sweep through the cracks of the cold stone door. The scent of old leather and half-burnt candle wax clings to the space, creating a dry feeling fraught with tension. Octavian is sitting there, his thin shoulders trembling slightly under a thick wool cloak, his hands ceaselessly turning over letters. You see fatigue etched deeply into his pale face, where the cracks of anxiety are beginning to show terrifyingly. Records show that after the victory at Philippi, the Roman world was split in two between two ambitious men. While Octavian faced famine in Italy, Mark Antony was enjoying supreme luxury in the Far East. You smell the heavy scent of frankincense wafting from Queen Cleopatra's perfume-soaked letters and intoxicating aroma. It stands in complete contrast to the smell of marble dust and frost in Rome that you and he endure daily. A strange detail from the records shows that Antony had begun to line his eyes with soot like a courtesan and dressed in the Egyptian fashion. This cultural betrayal disgusted Octavian, but at the same time, it presented a golden political opportunity for him. You see him clenching the parchment, his breathing turning heavy as he realizes his former ally has been completely mesmerized. Some scholars still argue that records show Octavian intentionally distorted Antony's image to transform a civil war into a patriotic war. The loneliness of power is gnawing at the young man's soul as he is forced to cast aside his bond with his sister, Octavia. You want to comfort the inner turmoil within him, but you understand that this is the price to be paid for becoming the sole leader. Together, we witness Octavian beginning the smear campaign against Antony, transforming a gallant general into a slave to foreign lust. Every line he writes carries cold calculation, masking the pain of a friendship long dead. You feel the pulse of Rome changing with every cautious and cunning step taken by that young man. He does not choose to confront his enemy directly with swords and spears, but begins by capturing the hearts and fears of the entire populace. The room grows dark, leaving only the flickering firelight reflected in eyes, full of determination but also profound emptiness. You know that this rift is irreparable, and a storm more violent than ever is gradually taking shape. Let your mind drift with Octavian's lonely contemplations as he prepares for a confrontation from which there is no turning back. You find yourself stepping into a new era with him, where personal feelings must yield to the destiny of the nation. The cold propaganda finally leads to an inevitable confrontation, where the deep blue waters of Actium will become the witness to the moment that changes the destiny of the entire empire. You stand on the side of Octavian's ship, where the Ionian Sea winds blow strongly, bringing the saltiness of the sea and the scent of cedarwood. Before you, Antony's massive fleet looms like ghosts upon the water, obscuring the view of the distant coastline. Octavian stands at the prow, his frail figure obscured by magnificent golden armor that seems almost too heavy for him. His gaze does not leave the horizon, where the destiny of the Roman world is about to be decided in a few moments. An official historical fact is that the naval Battle of Actium took place in 31 BC, marking the end of the Civil War. This was a life and death confrontation between Roman tradition and the Eastern allure of Queen Cleopatra. You feel the slight vibration of the deck beneath your feet as the oarsmen begin to rhythmically move the ship into battle position. The sweat of thousands of slaves beneath the wooden floorboards mingles with the scent of varnish, creating an extremely thick atmosphere. Marcus Agrippa, the loyal friend and military genius, commands the entire battle in place of an Octavian who was never skilled in naval warfare. You see absolute trust, yet profound anxiety in every nod Octavian gives to Agrippa. Some scholars still argue that this battle was not actually a large-scale clash, as legends often recount. They suggest it may have been merely a series of minor skirmishes leading to Antony's flight. The trumpets blare, tearing through the quiet space, and suddenly fire arrows begin to streak brilliant paths across the sky. You see ships ablaze, the smell of charred wood, and the screams of soldiers echoing amidst the deep blue waves. A strange detail from the records shows that, in the heat of the battle, Cleopatra suddenly ordered the Egyptian fleet to turn back. Mark Antony, for the sake of love, abandoned tens of thousands of fighting soldiers to chase after his lover. You witness the shock clear on Octavian's face as he watches Antony's ship glide toward that distant horizon. He does not rejoice immediately. Instead, he seems enveloped in a state of astonishment at this ruthless betrayal. Broken wreckage drifts on the water, and the acrid smell of smoke begins to blur your eyes in the glowing red twilight. Empathy surges within as you see Octavian standing silently amidst victory, but his heart seems to have grown even colder. He understands that from this moment on, no one can stand as his equal at the summit of world power. The shadow of loneliness begins to lengthen on the deck as he officially becomes the sole master of Rome. As the smoke and fire of the naval battle receded, we see a strategic Augustus skillfully putting away his sword to begin building a brilliant Pax Romana from the ashes. You are standing in the shadows of the great marble columns in the Senate on a sunny day in January 27 BC. The mild scent of incense, mingling with the anxious whispers of the senators, creates an atmosphere that is both solemn and mentally taxing. Before you, Octavian enters with a humble demeanor, carrying neither the sword nor the arrogance of a man who has just triumphed at Actium. He declares that he is returning all power to the Roman people, an act that leaves the entire hall in stunned silence. Records show that this was actually a highly sophisticated political performance staged to legitimize his absolute power. Instead of being a tyrant, he chose to be the princeps, meaning the first citizen, to soothe Roman hearts that yearned for freedom. An official historical fact is that on this very day, the Senate bestowed upon him the noble title of Augustus, meaning the illustrious or revered one. This name was not just a title, but the deification of a mortal man into a symbol of peace. You see Augustus's shoulders relax slightly upon receiving this title, but in those blue eyes, a deep sadness still lingers. He understands that from now on he must live forever, behind a mask of perfection, never allowed to display weakness. Imagine the peace spreading throughout Rome, like the feeling of sitting by a peacefully flowing river in a Disney animated film. The era of Pax Romana, or Roman peace, began to take shape from the very calculations and patience of this man. A strange detail from the record shows that Augustus was so obsessed with renovating the city that he considered every stone a part of his own soul. He frequently walked through dusty construction sites, where crude brick structures were slowly being transformed into marble masterpieces. The sound of the box fan in your room right now is perhaps like the sound of the wind blowing through the newly built squares glowing under the golden Roman sun. You feel the pride of the emperor as he watches the city transform, yet you also see the loneliness of a man who can trust no one. The fracture in his worldview lay in the fact that he was forced to destroy the old republic to save the survival of the empire. He was the architect of a grand system, but the price to be paid was the personal freedom he once craved. You stand there, witnessing a brilliant Rome emerge from the ashes of decades of bloody civil wars that have just passed. The light from the newly built temples reflects the determination of Augustus, the man who turned shards of brick into an era of prosperity. Amidst the magnificence of the marble city, you begin to recognize the chill of solitude surrounding the emperor, as the price of ultimate power is the shattering of personal bonds. You are walking through the Roman Forum on a sun-drenched afternoon, where the steady clinking of stone chisels echoes regularly. The delicate white marble dust floats in the air, silently clinging to your cloak. Augustus stands before the majestic temple of Mars Ultor, his hand gently touching a newly erected polished pillar. You see the calluses on his fingertips, a testament to the emperor's obsessive attention to detail. An official historical fact is that he rebuilt more than 80 old, long-abandoned temples. He believed that restoring traditional religion would help heal the spiritual wounds of the Roman people after the wars. A strange detail from the records shows that, despite building the world's most luxurious structures, Augustus lived extremely simply. He frequently slept in a small, narrow room with a low bed, almost no different from that of an ordinary soldier. Records show the contradiction between a brilliant empire on the outside and a family crumbling on the inside. You feel the chill emanating from his heart as he is forced to sign the exile order for his own daughter, Julia. Julia, his only hope, had betrayed the very strict moral laws that her father had painstakingly established. You see Augustus sitting alone in the dark, with only a flickering candlelight reflecting the ultimate pain of a father. Empathy surges as you realize that the most powerful man on the planet does not have a single soulmate. Old comrades like Agrippa or Maecenas have all passed away, leaving him alone with his royal mask. The smell of cheap wine mixed with heavy perfume from the aristocrats' parties drifts in from the distance. He despises that decadence, yet painfully realizes he is the one who created this tempting prosperity. You stand silently, watching the hunched back of the emperor who turned brick into marble but lost his warmth. His loneliness at this moment is heavier than any great block of stone being transported out there. Thanks to his experience surviving the marshes at Philippi years ago, Augustus learned how to endure all hardships in absolute silence. He understood that the stability of the empire required him to completely sacrifice his personal happiness forever after. Let your mind settle, listening to the wind blowing through these empty and cold marble corridors. You are entering the final years of his life with him, when glory is nothing more than a weary shell. The pale moonlight casts shadows on the great structures, turning Rome into a cemetery of unfinished dreams. You feel his slow breathing amidst the stillness, preparing for a final, fateful parting. As the final rays of sunset cast shadows across the great Rome, we quietly accompany Augustus on his final journey back to Nola, where the play of his life is about to close with a farewell round of applause. You are standing in a rustic room in the town of Nola, where the harsh summer sun of central Italy is kept at bay by thick stone walls. The scent of dried lavender mixed with light incense gently wafts through the air, creating a somber and silent atmosphere. On a narrow bed, the 75-year-old emperor lies motionless, his skin pale and fragile like an old piece of parchment. You see his thin chest rising and falling with difficulty, every breath carrying the exhaustion of 4 decades of rule. An official historical fact is that Augustus passed away on August 19, 14 AD, in the very house of his father. His return to his roots to draw his final breath seems to have been a meticulously prepared psychological arrangement. A strange detail from the records shows that, in his final moments, he requested a bronze mirror and a comb. You witness him meticulously arranging his disheveled hair and setting his facial expressions to appear majestic and dignified. You feel a surge of heartache seeing this great man still clinging to his mask until the very last moment. Even when facing death, he did not allow himself to display any weakness or panic. Some scholars still argue that his request for a final round of applause was a bitter acknowledgement of the theatrical nature of power. Had he, for the past 45 years, been forced to play a grand role to keep Rome peaceful and stable? He turned to his closest friends standing around the bed and asked if he had played his part well in the comedy of life. When they nodded in confirmation, he smiled gently and requested that they applaud as he exited the stage. Records show that he passed away in the arms of Livia Drusilla, the wife who had accompanied him through over 50 years of ups and downs. His final words to her were to live well and never forget their marriage. You stand there, watching the glowing red sunset stretch across the marble floor, feeling the quiet conclusion of a great era. You want to reach out and touch his shoulder, but realize you are only an invisible traveler of a distant time. The chirping of the cicadas outside the window begins to fade, giving way to the eternal silence enveloping the room. The architect of the empire has completed his mission, leaving behind a world of peace and a Rome of marble. As the image of the room in Nola gradually fades, you feel your mind gently drifting back through time to return to the present. The pure white marble columns and sun-drenched squares of Rome begin to dissolve into the hazy mist of distant memories. The rhythm of Roman legions' footsteps and the bustle of the Forum are now only a faint echo far, far away. You are lying here, safe and warm in your own room, where the darkness soothes every steady and peaceful breath. The era of Augustus has receded into the history books, but the tranquility he painstakingly established seems to still linger somewhere nearby. Listen to the steady hum from the box fan or Marpak dome. They are creating a soothing wall of sound. Your body is becoming relaxingly heavy, sinking deep into the comfort of the mattress and the softness of the warm blanket. You have traveled through a grand life together, witnessing a frail teenager become the master of the entire Roman world. Now all the burdens of history have been completely cast off, leaving only absolute peace reserved for your soul. Let your dreams take you to the lush green fields of Velitrae, or the tranquil rivers flowing under the vast moonlight. I wish you a very deep, restful sleep, and may you wake up with a heart full of fresh energy for tomorrow. Good night.